Did that sound right?
I wasn't paying attention. Which one are we talking about?
Why are you here if you're not paying attention? Hey everybody, Deathblade here with another Chinese fantasy novel FAQ. This is another topic that was voted on by the patrons over at Patreon. So if you like my content, please consider supporting on Patreon or via any of the links in the description below. Another quick reminder, I am filming under COVID-19 lockdown in California, and I have a crazy 4-year-old running around the house. It is entirely possible that he might come in at some point, like he did in the last video. By the way, I wanted to point out that in the last video he came in wanting to pet the cat. I did let him pet the cat. What you saw in that video was only about 15 seconds of the entire 5-minute interruption. So anyway, today I'm talking about the pronunciation of various Chinese characters, and specifically the names of the people that you'll see in the novels. Some Chinese names are a lot easier to pronounce than others, and so what I'm doing is I'm picking 3 letter combinations that I find to be particularly difficult, and I'm gonna tell you how to pronounce them, both a really simple way that doesn't really focus too much on accuracy language-wise, and then a little bit more of an accurate version. I actually have Madame Deathblade sitting here with me so that she can correct my pronunciation in case I make any mistakes. So what I'm going to do in the video is I'm going to basically break it up into 3 sections. The first section I'm going to be talking about Chinese pronunciation in general when it comes to the Chinese characters and when it comes to people's names. Then I'm going to pick a handful of the really common names that start with the 3 letters that I picked, and I'm going to tell you the super easy way to pronounce them. Not necessarily the most accurate, but the easiest. And then thirdly, I am going to go into the more correct and proper way to pronounce them. I do want to point out that I'm not coming at this topic from the perspective of Chinese language learning. So if you are trying to learn Chinese and you want your pronunciation to be correct, this isn't really the video for you. This is more geared toward people who read these novels a lot and just want to kind of have a accurate pronunciation, but not necessarily from the perspective of a language learner. There are a lot of videos out there on Chinese pronunciation, and I'm sure if you just do a quick search in the search bar on YouTube, you can find a ton of them. Yo-Yo Chinese is a channel that I recommend a lot. They have a series of videos talking about all the different various pronunciations. So obviously some of the Chinese characters and of the surnames are harder to pronounce than others, and some of the times that's obvious because the letter combinations don't make sense in English, but other times the letter combinations do seem to make sense, and yet it's pronounced a different way. For example, I'll never forget way back in the day when I was translating I Shall Seal the Heavens, and the character's name is Meng Hao, and it's spelled M-E-N-G because that's how you pronounce it in Chinese, Meng. And most people assumed it was Meng because that's kind of how you would think to pronounce it in English. And so a lot of people were blown away when they heard me on a video or something pronounce his name as Meng Hao because they just couldn't understand that. I've also seen people complain, and even just as recently as a couple months ago, somebody messaged me on Discord and they were like, well, why are the Chinese names pronounced differently from the way they're spelled in English? Look, the ABC letters are not just used in the Western world by English speakers. They're used in a lot of different cultures and languages to represent sounds. And I'm not going to get into a whole big discussion of how Hanyu Pinyin came about. Hanyu Pinyin is the romanization of the Chinese language. The long story short is each letter has a pronunciation that corresponds to a Chinese pronunciation that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with English. So this is a really big topic. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time going into it. Let's talk about one thing, which is initials and finals in the Chinese language. So basically, every syllable in Chinese, and by extension most of the individual Chinese characters, have an initial sound and a final sound. So in other words, the initial sound is what you start the word with, and the final sound is what you end it with. For example, in English, the word cat, k is the initial sound, at is the final sound, you put them together, cat. Most Chinese characters have an initial and a final, and there's a set number of them. There's a set number of initials, a set number of finals. They put them together in a chart, and then in that chart you can see all the possible combinations of different phonemes that you can make in Chinese. There are a few exceptions to the rule about initials and finals, but I'm not going to get too much into the weeds. So today I picked 3 letters, which are Q, X, and J, and they're actually all part of the same sort of family of pronunciations. On the pinyin chart, if you look it up, you will see them together. That's because they all have a similar way that you put the tongue and the lips and the teeth together to make the different sounds. So first let's get into the very quick and dirty method. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take several of the most common names that start with these different letters J, Q, and X, and I'm going to put it on the screen, and I'm going to tell you a very rough and dirty way to pronounce them. Now I just want to again clarify, What I'm going to teach you now is not the correct way to pronounce them according to the proper way to speak Chinese. This is just for people who are not interested at all in speaking Chinese, but do kind of want to say the names correctly. For example, instead of saying Meng Hao, saying Meng Hao, that's the correct way to pronounce it. Here we go with these different names. I do have my little cheat sheet here. So the first set of names, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them on the screen and I'm going to read them very slowly just so that you can look at them and copy them, and then that's it. In the next section where I go into like the advanced pronunciation part, I'll go a little bit more into detail about how you're supposed to pronounce these different initials and finals. So starting with the J names, for the easiest way to pronounce J in Chinese, it's basically just like J in English, so J. And then I have 3 names here, well there's 4, but 2 of them are kind of the same, they just differ in tone, which as a person who's not studying Chinese, you don't need to worry about that. The first one is Jia, then Jiang, and then Jin. Those are the easiest ways to pronounce them for people who don't care too much about the pronunciation. And next we have a group that starts with Q. Now basically the way to pronounce Q in Chinese is like a CH sound in English. So ch. It is not pronounced hard K. So for example, everybody knows that the mystical energy that runs through your body, which is spelled Qi, that should be pronounced chi, not ki. Ki comes from the Japanese pronunciation. You'll see that in certain role-playing games, and sometimes they'll even spell it as Ki. In pinyin, in Chinese, Q is pronounced CH, so the energy is chi. So going through this list of 4 names that are common and start with the Q sound, you have Qian, Qiao, Qin, and Qiu. So those 4. Now coming up to the X, this one is really hard to pronounce correctly in Chinese. For the casual reader, you can just pronounce it like an SH sound. That's the easiest way to do it. I have quite a few. This list looks like it has about 10 on them, so I'm going to go through them. The first one is Xia, then Xiang, Xiao, Xie, Xin, Xiong, Shu, and then Xue. I tell them that's your name.
That's my family name.
Yeah, that's her family name. So actually, I have a couple different names that I go by in Chinese in China, and in one of them, I adopted her family name as my own, and so occasionally, on actually some official paperwork in China at the police station and stuff, this is also my surname. My main surname is Bai, which is why I use the name Jeremy Bai in my writing and whatnot. Okay, now we're gonna go into the more proper and correct way to pronounce these things. Now here's the thing, all of these letters, J, Q, and X, involve putting your tongue in essentially the same position in your mouth. Now unlike the hard J, the CH, or the SH sound, you're not using your tongue up toward the top. What you're actually doing is you keep the tongue right here, basically touching your bottom teeth like this. Right there, and you keep your tongue relaxed the entire time that you use these letters to pronounce anything. So instead of it being a hard J, J, it's more like J. And you keep your tongue there and you keep your mouth relaxed and your teeth a little bit apart like a T, and the X is not an SH sound. It's actually like halfway between SH and a hard S. Not sh, not s, but like sh, a little bit between those two. It's hard to hear the difference when you're just going with the initial pronunciation. For the most part, you really have to actually add the final pronunciation and make an actual full sound to be able to hear it. So let's go through these first 3 or 4 that are with the J sound. There's basically 3 finals that we're dealing with, as you can see on the screen. There's a J coupled with IA, then IANG, and then IN. So the first one, keeping your tongue really relaxed and your and behind your teeth, the first one is jia, and then the next one is jiang. And of course the third one, if you're really interested in the tones, is the first tone, and so it's jiang as opposed to jiang. And then the third one is jin. So if you can hear the difference between those, the first one, well, so I'm not going to do this with every single one, but what I'll do is with this group at least, I'll go through and I'll do the quick and dirty pronunciation and then the correct pronunciation so that you can kind of hear the difference between the two. So the first one, quick and dirty, jia, correct? Jia. And we'll do that back and forth with the rest of them. So jiang, 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 and jiang, and then jin and jin.
Slower?
I think it's too confusing for people. Or what?
It's not. No. I don't think so.
Okay, so reviewing the J ones again, that's jia, jiang, jiang, and jin. So moving on to the Q, again, you're going to keep your tongue relaxed, kind of toward the front. We're not having as much of a harsh CH sound with this one. So for the first one, 钱, 巧, 琴, 秋. So you can hear there's a little bit less of an emphasis on the hard CH sound. So moving on to the X's, I have this large list. So again, keeping the tongue relaxed and toward the bottom of your mouth and up toward your teeth, we're going to have 下, 相, 消, 谢, 心, 熊, 许, 许, 薛. Again, this is not from the perspective of a language learner, so if you're trying to learn Chinese properly, I am pretty confident in my pronunciation, but I'm not perfect. So if you want to have the best pronunciation, obviously you need to get advice from a Chinese person. Another thing I want to point out is that all of these letter combinations, the J, the Q, and the X, if you do the rough and dirty pronunciation, then you're actually going to be making a big mistake because there are those letter combinations in Pinyin. So ZH makes a hard J sound, CH makes a hard CH sound, and SH makes a hard SH sound. So if you apply those sounds to these letter combinations, you can get confusion if you're trying to speak Chinese. But for the purposes of pronouncing names, I think that this is good enough. I was thinking of doing a recap at this point, but I realized that you can simply just go back and click through the video to look at the different parts. What I will do is I'm going to put timestamps in the video description or maybe one of the pinned comments that you can easily and quickly jump to a different section of the video that'll make it easier to come back and review this at any time. So that's it for this video. I hope it was helpful. I think these are the hardest combinations for names. If there are other combinations that you find hard or you're confused about how to pronounce, do feel free to leave a comment. Either in that comment, I'll kind of give you some advice on how to pronounce it, or perhaps I'll do another video in the future with different combinations of names. Again, learning Chinese is very fun, very difficult, and I think it would be worth it for you if you read a lot of Chinese fantasy novels and you're interested in pronouncing the names right. Go to one of those channels on YouTube that have videos about how to pronounce Pinyin and all the different combinations. You could probably spend just a couple hours and go through all of them and get it firsthand from a Chinese person how to pronounce all these things. The point of my channel isn't language learning, so I'm not going to do like a million videos with every different combination. Again, if you like this content, please do like and subscribe, share the video, or use the links in the description to support. Really appreciate it. I'll see you in the next video. Gaozi.